we are prepared for the next lesson. I believe many of you were attending the workshop of Randy yesterday. How did it go?
It was really great. A lot of fun, very informative, many cool topics.
Okay, so I believe we couldn't see you yet. Ah, Randy?
Yep.
Okay, so you're here.
So
Okay,
we can begin.
yes, it took really a long time yesterday. Yes, you were like more than 2 hours awake still.
It
Yeah,
was it was a nice long talk and discussion.
great. Fantastic. Okay. So
Recording in progress.
I'm starting recording your second session.
Great.
Looking forward.
All right. Welcome to everybody who's here now, and welcome back to everyone who was with me yesterday. This is a talk. It was going to be a workshop originally, but I think it's kind of going to be more of a talk or a presentation now. Just because the original goal was to have some kind of back and forth with participants, and it's just a logistical challenge to arrange that. And there's also kind of a last minute. It was kind of tricky to do that last minute. So this is a discussion and presentation about something new. Can you believe it? Something new with the theremin. Everything's new. This talk is called Visual Pitch Preview. So we today we're going to be cementing new vocabulary into the theremin lexicon uh, with visual pitch preview. And so I think before I dive into what that is, we kind of need to set up a little bit of background with what came before what you're about to see. And if you are if you're playing a modern instrument like uh, at least the last 25 years, starting from the ether wave, or around the period of time the ether wave came out, and there were modifications applied to it, but especially after the Moog Ethervox came out, and then of course the Etherwave Pro. There were a number of instruments that started to include a headphone output in there, like that's like a stock feature of the theremin itself. And of course, you would use that to practice when you're in a space where you can't make loud sounds and you can't have an amplifier going. So the output of the headphone was there, and then I can't recall. I don't have the details to provide exactly when it happened, but somebody or some buddies decided they'd like to listen to that sound and use that as sort of like a helping hand uh, when they're trying to find their pitch, but they also don't want to make any sound happen until they're ready. And so this thing kind of came out from, I think it came off and branched off of the headphone, the inclusion of the headphone port on theremins. But that was pitch preview. And so the idea is you hear a pitch sustaining in your ears, and then that pitch is kind of like full volume in your ears, but it's not happening in the main output of the instrument, and that would allow the player to know what pitch they're on before anyone in the audience can know, you know, that they were looking for it, or that they had any idea, and it just shortened the amount of time that it takes to just get on the right note. I personally didn't use pitch preview at all when I had access to it on the Etherwave Pro. Um, there was also different improvements on the design of that. My friend Roger Ballinger had an interaction with Bob Moog and requested a certain interaction where the volume of the pitch preview faded out as the amplitude of your main theremin output increased. So you'd hear the note in your ear, but as soon as you raise your volume hand, that in-ear preview of the sound would fade out, and then the amplifier or the amplified sound would come in, of course, at the normal level that you're performing with in your expression in your volume hand. So that's what we started with, pitch preview, and a lot of people love it. And I know that thereminist Peter Pringle uses it, and Rob Schwimmer used it in a few. I don't know if everybody here is familiar with Rob Schwimmer. He's a fine thereminist and fantastic keyboard and continuum player. He was using it on a live gig where he had to come in playing theremin solo with an ensemble, but he had to come in from silence. And anybody that's played a theremin knows that if you there's not really an exact way to know exactly what note you're on just by moving your hand in the space. I think many people have echoed that throughout the Academy schedule here. That middle C or whatever, the G above middle C, you don't really know exactly where it is. Some people who have a good memory of their have good muscle memory and a good idea of their space can get really, really close. Um, but it's pretty hard. So you come in on that note very silently through the monitors, kind of soft enough where you can hear it as the player, but the audience doesn't quite hear it yet. And then you sort of find people have used this term. This is another term that's been thrown around, which is pitch fishing, where that first note is kind of like you don't know where it is until your ear locks into it and you find it, but you have to fish around for it. I don't like to use that terminology because it's possible to, if you're skilled at this interface, it's possible to just play one note. You're playing interface, and you move to the note that you're supposed to start on. So if I were to play that note, but I wanted to actually start on the fifth above it, I didn't have to um, listen to the fifth above it for very long to find it. I knew that I needed to move that much further to get to that um, uh, to get to the fifth. Actually, was that a fifth? That was a fourth. There's the fifth. So that was pitch preview. But today we're going to add new terminology, and that's visual pitch preview, which makes the original pitch preview audio pitch preview. So what is visual pitch preview? That is, it's been talked about a little bit here and there in the Theremin forums, but as far as I remember, and as far as memory serves, I was involved in most of those conversations. So if you were around yesterday and you've heard me talk about the software that I've been developing, or that I developed and have been using for the last 8 years, I've had this function in it which allowed me to see the pitch of the note that I'm playing displayed on a screen in real time. And this feature, this feature of the software, I'm very pleased to announce that I've pulled that out of my previous software that's kind of just been hidden and only for me for a while. And many people, there's quite a few people that have used it, but I've taken the element of visual pitch preview out of my other software called MIDI Merlin and put it into this new software called Merlin Tuner. And this is a software product that I'm distributing a new tool, and I'm just going to read the description that I put on my website because it's like kind of summarizes everything, but it's kind of super long description. But that is, you can visualize theremin pitch in a high-resolution real-time display for enhanced live performance capability, improvement of playing technique, pitch accuracy, aural skills, muscle memory, pitch transition time, theremin vibrato, body stability, and aiding instrument tuning, calibration, and troubleshooting environmental interference issues. So I will parse all of that out, hopefully, in the next 20 minutes. But that is what you can kind of expect to see improvements in, and not just improvements, but like new capabilities of with your theremin playing experience when you use a visual pitch preview display. So what I'm going to do is show you what this thing looks like and explain it. Those of you who were with me yesterday have already gotten introduced and gotten acquainted with it on the surface level. What I'm going to do today is actually dive into it and talk about everything, at least all the benefits that I've enjoyed and gotten from this feedback that's reflecting my theremin pitch back to me visually at the same exact time as the audio. So here we go. This is Merlin Tuner. As you can see above me, hopefully, we have a keyboard display interface, and you've got a bar above that with a little red thing that's moving around. What does any of that mean? Okay, of course, everyone that's familiar with the piano roll knows that that note that's highlighted there. It basically, if you're playing that note on the piano on the keyboard that's that wide, 88 to whatever 92 keys wide, that you're going to hear that note. This tuner device, this pitch preview device, does not generate any sound. It's like purely visual. So what's happening is sound is going into it, and I'll talk about how it gets in there in a minute. But sound is getting into a signal's going into the software and it is reflecting back to you. But the key distinction between, and I talked about this yesterday, the key distinction between visual pitch preview and a tuner, which of course there's going to be confusion around this because I've called the device Merlin Tuner. Merlin just comes from the previous software, MIDI Merlin. But the tuner and visual pitch preview are kind of like two different things. A tuner, many of you, hopefully all of you, have used a tuner, and they're usually a piece of hardware. Sometimes you'll see it in software, but that tuner's there, and it shows you there's usually like a needle that's moving back and forth. It tells you if your pitch is either flat or sharp. And that's basically what I've got going on in that top section of the display. If you look closely, if you're zoomed in on the screen on Zoom or watching it full screen, you'll see little tick marks that kind of divide that space up. So there's actually 4 quadrants, and in the very middle there's a little tick mark, and that designates the very center of the pitch. So that's the same thing as your needle being centered. And then, of course, when you go to your right, that's going to be sharp, and when you go to your left, that is flat of the note that's actually being registered there. So if the note name that's showing up in the display on the side says F3, then if I'm starting from the center and I move there, I'm going sharp, and if I move down, I'm going flat. Right? But the key distinction here between a tuner and a visual pitch preview is it's one thing, but it's really two parts. But that is the responsiveness of the display. And the responsiveness breaks down into latency and resolution. So anybody that's worked with digital signal processing or working with like analog sensors or control voltage or really anything that needs to get sampled. I mean, I'm kind of flipped that around. Anything that is already sampled that gets converted back into something useful like digital audio. In this case, it's getting converted to a visual. Uh, any digital source needs to have a high rate of communicating the data, and it needs to be arriving right on time when it's like synchronized with its source. When you have the synchronization between the visual and the audio is, of course, your theremin sound. When you have this synchronization, like perfect, as close as possible to synchronization between your visual, your auditory sense, and your muscles. So you actually have three sources of feedback. When those can be combined and when they operate and they're synchronized, that's when you can make sense of what you're seeing. And the problem with tuners, this is the distinction between tuners. A typical tuner has such a long amount of latency, and that's just designed to filter out some sporadic data that's coming in, some sporadic sensor input, and to smooth it so that it's not so jittery, but it's also to resolve the pitch, and it's also to make it just easier to work with. So in general, tuners are slow to respond, and that's what makes it hard for us theremin players to utilize it. Inside the Theremin, this is a good example. There's actually a pitch display, and it's a little tuner, and it shows you what note you're on. I'm not sure if that's been improved at all, but the first time I saw that, I noticed how sluggish it was. You can find your note. You know exactly what note you're going to play if you hold still enough, but you don't get the resolution that you get when you're looking at a tuner like this, at a visual pitch preview like this. I'm going to confuse the words and interchange them every once in a while, but the reason why this sort of thing hasn't come about before is just technological limitation. You've got to do some juggling behind the scenes to display information effectively, and so that's what I've done in the interface. And so when you're looking at it, it's going to be flying, and only when you're holding absolutely still does it start to get understandable. But that's like the goal. That is one of my goals. I mean, you're standing still. It tells you something. It is providing you information, and every movement that you've been doing when you've been playing the theremin has been providing you information. But up until now, it's been mostly just auditory feedback and a little bit of muscular feedback, like how far you've extended your fingers. So this is a new thing showing up, and I want to talk a little bit about what the benefits are, and for myself personally, what it's done for me. And I'm going to go through some examples a little bit later. But let's talk about let's kind of parse out that description, kind of a step at a time, so that I mean, it's just not just a jumble of words. All right, so I'm going to glance over here. So there's performance capability that you get from a visual pitch preview display. And if we go back to the example where you're playing in an ensemble and you need to come in from absolute silence, and that's not like at all making any sound, and you don't have auditory pitch preview, or maybe you don't enjoy having the sound of a theremin in your ear before sound comes out of the amplifier. It's a real unusual experience to have, but I think the people who have used visual, that have used auditory pitch preview have just gotten used to it because there's nothing better. And I think visual pitch preview is something better. So I've been playing in concerts on stage with orchestras, and I need to come in solo without any fudging around of the pitch, and without I mean, there's nobody else playing, and there's no way I can start the note unless it's like right on. Generally, what's been done in the past is the theremin player's amplifier has such a wide dynamic range that you can start your note and you can hear it in the monitors. So many people have done this, including Clara Rockmore. If you listen very, very, very carefully in her recordings of the art of the theremin and the Lost Theremin album, there are recordings on those albums where you can hear Clara seeking and finding the pitch before the recording starts. So visual pitch preview will eliminate all that. Here's the catch. There's a computer involved with this setup, but that's just for now. What I hope to do in the future is make this visual pitch preview display standalone hardware. So that is really when it's going to take off. But that's in the context of a live performance scenario. So when I say performance capabilities, I'm talking about coming in from silence. I'm talking about things like, on multiple occasions I've been playing in the orchestra, and the group is so loud that I can't even hear what's coming out of my own theremin speaker. My own monitoring is below the level of the overall level of the orchestra. So how are you supposed to deal with that? You basically just gotta start playing, and when things get loud, you gotta hope that your muscle memory has been developed to a point where you can stay, where you can get close to the notes if you have to change while this loud thing's happening behind you. So I've been there on multiple occasions where I've had my visual pitch preview display in front of me, and it's what I've done in the past is had a small monitor, a USB display that I can put on my music stand. And if this was compatible with the iPad, which it's not, I would use an iPad or an iPhone. But this is for PC and Mac on a desktop only at the moment. But I've been in multiple occasions. I've needed to have a visual aid help me to stay on pitch center when I couldn't hear myself. The monitoring was either not happening. I've had monitoring fail, where like the front of house, where the stage mix was supposed to provide me a floor monitor, and it didn't work. and the monitor that I had and my in-ears weren't providing me a loud enough signal. I had, if I did not have the visual pitch preview, I would have just played all wrong notes, no question. So, so performance capabilities. I mean, there's more to it, but in general, it's like coming in from silence, playing really delicate stuff, and then playing really, really loud stuff where monitoring is an issue. Okay, we'll move on to the next thing, which is playing technique. Everything that I'm doing in my playing technique has only been made possible because of this display. I think I need to take a moment and actually show you all the stuff, because many of you are probably unfamiliar with my playing, and then those of you who are familiar with my playing might have seen what I looked like 10 years ago or something from a while ago. So much has changed. So just imagine 8 years of using this interface, and I've had the awareness of what's going on such a fine level that I can custom tailor choices in and how I want to design a playing technique, a technical playing approach. So I'm going to summarize my playing technique like as fast as possible. There's going to be plenty of time later. I'm going to probably do presentations and videos where I talk about my technique in depth. But really quickly, I play melodically. I want to be on pitch center when I play theremin, when I play melodies, and when I'm performing. So I want there to be accuracy when I'm playing stepwise patterns. And there are other techniques that have been shared, Lydia's and Carolina. There's fingering techniques where there's finger positions. I've got my set of finger positions, but it's much different, and I'll just try to summarize. The first part of it is I have the scale technique, and I play scales broken up into blocks, and these blocks are called tetrachords. So it's just groupings of 4 notes. So let me just start playing the major tetrachord. So the first 4 notes of the major scale, and then I have this technique where I transition between blocks. I just call it a transition or a pitch reposition, where I collapse my fingers and extend my arm at the same time, and I'm resetting my position while playing an interval. So at the same time of playing an interval, and so in this case, I started on the C major tetrachord, but I want to continue that scale, so I'll shift up to the 5th. But what I really did is I moved up a whole step to the 5th from the 4th. And I can do that backwards as well, like in reverse. And then once I'm on the 5th scale degree of the major scale, I can perform the same major tetrachord again to finish off the scale. Let me make sure I'm calibrated here. Okay. So you can imagine when technique is built and pieced together like a modular, that you can group different combinations of technique together and kind of link them together, use transitions, and achieve many complex patterns and shapes, melodic shapes. So tetrachords, I've got 4 basic tetrachords. The first one you've heard already, which is the major. I'm going to start down lower. That's the major tetrachord. There's one in minor. And then there is a diminished. And then there's an augmented. And when you use just those four blocks and combine those with position shifts at the fifth scale degree, you can play any mode of the major scale. And so I've got this technical etude that I wrote that works all of the modes of the major scale, and I do this every time I practice every morning, or at least when I can be able to practice. And I'll go slow, and I always do it with the metronome, but I'm not going to do it with the metronome right now, just so you can hear it clearly. But what I'm doing is I'm utilizing all four of my tetrachord blocks, and in different, they're grouped in different ways in order to play this pattern. And I'm in the key of A, so I'm starting on A3 above middle C. So I kind of fluctuated around, a little with the tempo there, but I mean I'll always be doing along with the metronome, so it'll be even. And I was kind of going slow at first, just to get my bearing. So playing technique. I mean, that's the scale technique I use there is kind of like the basis of pretty much everything I do, with the exception of arpeggios, which is a different, it is a different technique. So I'm with the scale technique, I'm moving individual fingers. With arpeggios, I move fingers uniformly. I'm uniformly extending them. But really, what I wanted to show, I mean, hopefully everybody's been watching what's been going on up here while I'm playing. But I'm watching it on my screen right in front of me the whole time. So I'm able to monitor not only what I'm playing live or when I'm practicing, but when I want to learn something new, I can slow everything way down and really focus on the distances I'm moving my fingers, and the speed at which I'm transitioning from one spot to the next if I need to do a shift, and coordinating the motions. And I mean, I'll try. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play the best example is the position shift. So I'll do that again from like the key center of C major. So it's that transition between the F and the G. So there's the C, the F. And it's really messy right now. So it's actually good for you to see this happening in in real time. So I'm playing the F, which is it's my fourth fourth position, like my hands basically in the open fourth position. Let me find the F again. And I'm collapsing my fingers so I can reset to position 1, but I'm shifting my arm forward by a whole step. Hopefully everybody's following along there. So here's the C again. And so with enough repetition, and when I'm warmed up and my body's stabilized and I feel comfortable, that interval and that transition just gets much cleaner. But that's what I'm practicing, just because that's an element that's part of my playing technique. So yeah, I mean, the technique is made of the tetrachords, which I explained, the uniform extension for arpeggios, and then what is compound extensions, which is finger extensions along with an arm extension. So you're combining an arm motion and a finger motion. I think many players are already doing this, but what I do is actually separate those two things, and I work on them individually. But coming back around, to the Merlin tuner here, and the visual pitch preview aid, I'm monitoring these motions while I'm practicing, and when something is out of alignment, or I've just missed the pitch, or I've overshot it by a little bit, I can see that, like, it's so clear. Of course, you've got to really be in control of your pitch. I mean, if my main mode of playing involves me moving my body around like this, I mean, forget about forget about this working. It's really meant for a fine level of precision and developing pitch accuracy, and developing the nuance. So the other thing, okay, I'm going to continue down my list, because that's, I mean, playing technique, it goes even further than that. But maybe under the umbrella of playing technique is vibrato, which I talked about yesterday. I'll explain it very briefly here one more time. And when I perform a vibrato, I start from a pitch center, and I'm oscillating around that pitch center. I'm vibrating around that pitch center. But what happens when I do that on the Merlin tuner, you'll see that something unique happens. And what happens is there's a bit of a motion blur effect, and I call that vibrato persistence, because that little thin indicator is, if it's jumping around so fast that it's really hard to tell where it is. And there's a thing that happens with computers, which is just the fast refresh rate is so fast that you'll see multiple images, because our eyes have a hard time. We can't clear the memory buffer. We have a memory of what we've just seen moments before it happened, and it doesn't fade away for a little while. For just, I mean, we're talking about milliseconds, but so the way to make the vibrato clear is to highlight the area of that's to highlight the area that indicator is moving across. And so every 1/2 oscillation, you see a window appear. But when you group all those 1/2 oscillations together, you have a constantly updating image of where your vibrato oscillation is, and whether it's centered, and how wide the oscillation is. So this is like super helpful in fine tuning the. It's a very complex subject, is developing theremin vibrato. There was more that I wanted to talk about yesterday. I didn't quite get to some things. I mean, the level of depth, but I think I covered most of it. But when we're talking about practicing vibrato, you've got to practice vibrato just like you practice anything. And if you've heard it, if you've heard the all the theremin teachers and music teachers pair this off, you need to practice slow, and you need to practice with the metronome. And every seasoned musician already knows this, so they're not going to go around and announce it that's what they're doing. But if you took a sneak peek into their practice sessions, this is what you would see. Here's my metronome going. I've got it on 118 beats per minute, and I'm going to practice vibrato. And I'm just going to do this not for a long time so I don't annoy all of you. But I'm just going to play one note, and I'm going to apply vibrato to that one note. I'm not going to do any scales, so I'm just going to pick this E above middle C. So it's actually not what it didn't work at the very beginning until I found the rhythm. But what you could see from above is how accurately my pitch center stayed, and simultaneously you see the oscillation width. And I care, you want to care about those things, because those have an impact on, those have a direct impact on the feeling that you get when you're playing or performing vibrato, and the feeling that the listener is going to hear. And your vibrato might, we touched on this a little bit yesterday, but your vibrato might last just a moment at the very tail end of a note, or it might be continuous. It might be sustaining throughout an entire long held sustained note. But if it's not consistent, the people who are listening to that they'll start to notice, and the key places they'll notice when it's off is the beginning, the middle, and the end, but especially the beginning, and in the middle, if you're, like I said, not centered the entire time and not creating a consistent width oscillation, that's a little bit noticeable. And then when you end a vibrato oscillation and you're not ending on the pitch center, that can also be problematic for the listener or for you, because let's say you've got to jump to another interval right after that. Of course, theremin playing is constantly trimming the sound that you're hearing and kind of updating your centeredness as you go, because you're never going to hit exactly center every single time, not without enormous amount of practice. But what we've got here is a tool. I'm just parroting this tool thing. You got a tool you can use to get consistent and provide you feedback to let you know if you are consistent or not. And what many musicians have done in the past is they're listening and they're feeling. But I think for the theremin, at least, especially for beginning, especially for developing something, developing a technique, or developing some pattern from scratch, it's so helpful to have the visual. Okay, Clara didn't have anything like this, and she ended up okay. She has fantastic vibrato. So if you need a reference, like I mentioned before in yesterday's talk, if you need a reference of what great sounding and consistent sounding vibrato sounds like, it's Clara, because what happens is when it's consistently oscillating, oscillating a consistent width, and when the pitch center is right on, you don't actually hear vibrato anymore. You hear the note, and then you hear this feeling and this effect that's associated with the vibrato and the intensity change. So if you're interested more about the vibrato stuff, hopefully you'll be able to check out the recording that was made yesterday after the fact, after the events over. Okay, so pitch accuracy, hopefully, I'm still parsing pitch accuracy. Hopefully you understand by now. You can play a giant interval, a giant leap in pitch. Let's say you're starting in C and you want to end up 2 octaves above that C. So we're on C3 now, and I want to end up at C5. Well, you can practice this and you can repeat that motion over and over again, and you can see how closely you arrive or miss, how you arrive to or overshoot or undershoot the 2 octave jump. I totally undershot it, okay? But you'll keep on doing this. And you'll use what you hear. You're combining oral feedback and muscular feedback and visual feedback together to sort of trim your input. Your input is like how much you're pushing your arm forward, the amount of time it takes for you to push your arm forward, and contracting the muscle groups that are involved with that interval. And you're making adjustments to that. I mean, it's nothing new if you've done leaps like this before. But when you can see it, when you can see things, and when it's obvious to exactly what degree you are missing, because of looking at either the keyboard note, in the keyboard roll, or the fine precision when you're looking at the indicator above it. The goal is for that indicator to not move, because if you're going from pitch center to pitch center, so let's do an easy thing, which is a whole step. The goal is to not see any movement in that indicator, and knowing what you're starting on is nice, but I think it's even nicer to know that you're centered on arrival to your destination, and you'll notice it too in the music that you're playing. And what's especially valuable to arriving on center is that you don't have to deal with the problem of the theremin as much, which is compounding error. If you make a pitch error and you make another pitch error that's like in the same direction, and another and another and another, and though you add all those pitch errors together, you have a cumulative error at the end. And if there's a net positive, guess what? You're in a new key. You're in a new key center, and your ears might not have heard it. You might have just missed it, or you weren't paying attention to the accompaniment, and now you're a whole step above it. So when the accompaniment stopped, because part of it's a solo, and when it comes back in, the accompaniment coming in from silence, and it's got to come in at the same key that you ended on, which is really your fault if you miss that.
Hey, Randy,
yes.
Can I interrupt you
for a moment?
Please. Okay. Congrats with this wonderful software you developed. You talked about Clara Rockmore and Lucy Bigelow, because this software a long way. Bigelow had a pitch preview, a very rudimentary pitch preview.
Okay.
Which you see here. I hope you can see it. It has a neon lamp on it.
Okay.
Can you see it?
Oh, I'm aware of I'm aware of this indicator.
Yeah, this is you can see if
you're on a particular note.
It lights up on about 440 hertz, but it's not so very smooth as you have accomplished. So you can only see the 440 hertz and the 220 hertz, but that's all you can see. And of course, it's not very particular, right to the point. So you have to look at the light and see if it glows up very much. And if it glows up very much, you about 440 hertz, but you have only the A. So
Yeah,
it was just for fun to build it, but it's, in my humble opinion, it's not so very useful. But
it is
it's nice to
fascinating.
have.
It
It's
is
nice
fast.
to have with this Rockmark clone. So
Yeah, since the instruments are really brother and
so
sister, sister and sister.
yeah,
But it
sorry, Pittsburgh has come a long way now. So as I can see on the screen, it is very wonderful, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
It's pretty fascinating that uh, ideas. I mean, they kind of an idea will happen and it will appear and kind of go away and reemerge and reappear and kind of take on a new shape.
yeah,
I think the idea of this tool probably existed long before now. What's
maybe, yeah,
but the technology of actually putting the pieces together just happened to be much more accessible and easy to. I mean, it's much easier to distribute something like this
yeah,
than
sure,
and like I mentioned about creating a hardware visual indicator like this. That involves somebody actually like piecing equipment and piecing components together and producing a tangible good. Software is
yeah,
like the best kind of. I mean, it's kind of tangible, but
yeah,
it's the
sure,
best, without question, the best and easiest for distribution.
yeah,
Distributing
agree,
distributing an improvement on something that has been released already is basically effortless. The developer just sends out their thing. You either download a new version or you patch the existing version that you have, and then you have this new functionality that just before that moment didn't even exist,
no, no, no,
except for the person's mind who
it's
developed it. That sort of thing does happen.
the software.
What? Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, it's so precise when you digitally controlled software. So this one is only it's depending on a coil. So you can see this coil here and here.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have not a very good quality coil, it's no good. So the trouble is always a compromise between exactness and to see. And this is so precise what I see on the screen.
Yeah, but you're actually right about that. There being a compromise. There's actually
Yeah.
a compromise going on right now with this display. It's just on a level. It's on a level of precision that we cannot perceive. Um,
Mm.
I'm not going to get into too much detail with that, but so I'm going to explain a little bit more about how I practice because that's really what
Okay.
this is. This is what I think would benefit everyone the most. We don't have very much time left, but maybe I'll cover these last few features really quick. Body stability is very important. How can you tell if your body's stable and maybe uh, your ear's not quite able to lock onto the exact center? Well, if you have this visual pitch preview aid, there's no more question. I mean, my hands are not up. Okay. My hands are at my body. Of course, I'm breathing, so that's having an effect. So I'm going to stop breathing for a moment. I'm going to stand absolutely still. And I'm going to see if I can hold the indicator as still as possible. It's very difficult. Okay. Now if I'm in playing position, what happens is your body's moving, but you're making slight compensations in your position. It's on a very small microscopic level, and of course that has an effect on the capacitance that the antenna is interfacing, and resulting in pitch, of course, with the the mechanics and innards of the theremin. There's a lot more going on with my instrument. I can't talk about right now uh, because I'm not using the sound of the Etherwave Pro. Hopefully everybody figured that out by now. I'm using a different sound generation method. I could talk about that maybe when we're freely conversing. Here we have the last couple things, which are pitch transition time. I think I explained that already. When you're jumping from interval to interval, you can, of course, clean the interval up and prevent overshooting and undershooting intervals, but you can really observe how long it takes to arrive to the next note, and you could practice different transition times. So if I play a major interval again, I'll play a major second from G to A. I'm playing around with the amount of time it takes to go from one to the next. And if you're building a technique from scratch, like if anybody out there was interested in attempting to utilize my technique, that's the only way that you can learn it. You have to go slow. So to learn the major tetrachord that I showed earlier, this is how I would do it. With each step of the way, and I would repeat it over and over again. Because when you can get the memory of what it feels like to play something slow, to increase the speed, and you're going to do this with a metronome always, because it's not enough to just hit the center of the note. You have to hit the center of the note when you mean for that to happen. Because if you have a series of notes happen and they're all different lengths and different intervals, and when you go to string them together, they're going to be inconsistent in the timing. All right. Really, the last most amazing thing you can get out of this device has to do with tuning, calibrating, and detecting interference, detecting how stable your instrument is. I've learned so much about this instrument, the Etherwave Pro, and all its problems. It's got a lot of little quirks here and there. A lot of them have to do with how stable the instrument is when it's not being played, when it's just sitting there. And when you're aware of how much the instrument is moving on its own without your involvement, you can tell very quickly while you're playing it if you missed a note, not because of your own fault, but not because of your own pitch error, but because the instrument actually just fluctuated in pitch. I know there's many of you with Etherwave Pros Etherwave Pro instruments that are aware of these glitches that happen and these pitch fluctuations. They are RF. They're related to RF interference. So I can be fine. There's nothing special going on in my apartment or flat. But if my downstairs neighbor turns on their plasma TV or whatever, some electronics, high frequency devices, they can interfere with the operating frequency. I mean, so it's not doing anything with the pitch antennas. That's an electrostatic interaction. But the operating frequency of the theremin can be modulated by RF from all over the place. That's why if you look at the back of your new Clarivox instrument, you'll see that according to the FCC or according to get certified as a product, it had to follow a certain set of rules, and that does involve possibly having to deal with interference, which may create undesirable effects to your operation of your instrument. Go look at it. Anybody who has got the Clarivox, look at the back of it. And I don't think the Etherwave Pro has that little message, but it's funny. I noticed it in the high quality photos that were shared. So I'm going to play something at the very end here. I'm going to play something that I've been practicing, and I'm not going to tell you what this is. This is the very last thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell you the song, and then whoever recognizes it first, just say it. Okay. I'm just going to play. I'm going to practice this section in this piece of music that I'm practicing. Okay, and I'm going to use the tuner, and hopefully somebody picks up on it. And I'm going to play it not in the tempo. I'm going to play it actually as I would if I'm practicing.
Arabesque number one.
Who was that?
That was me. Hello.
Ah, okay. Colin?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. You got it. So you've hopefully, I mean, probably many of you have heard Gregor Blanc or Carolina play this piece, but that opening set of intervals, I mean, that's like, it's clear this was written for piano. This was intended for the piano, not very many other instruments. But there's transcriptions, and of course, it's easier to play on a violin, but to play on a theremin and to play it with the kind of accuracy that you get out of a piano, I think the only way to do it is with a precision technique, and this is how I do it. So if you watch the tuner indicator, I'm going to attempt to slowly speed that up. All right, I'll keep on going. How about everyone probably wants to hear me continue. And I'm going to do it one more time, because this is what happens in practice. I didn't do that like the way I wanted to do it. Of course, it's not going to be ready. You know, this is not performance ready, but I'm going to try to get a little bit closer. All right. Thanks for sticking around and listening to.
I have a quick question, Randy, if you allow me.
Sure.
I'm quite fascinated by your fingerings, and I've been for a while since you announced them. Well, you put a short video more than a year ago, and I've been waiting to see you speak about them. Would you mind to do some more, a little bit of a chromatic movement with that kind of fingering?
Sure.
If you will, please. Thank
Yeah.
you.
One of the one of the very nice things about this modular tetrachord technique is that you can create whatever combination of blocks and of intervals that you want for the blocks. And I've got, of course, there's more than the 4 that I described. So there's the chromatic tetrachord block. There is the like fully diminished. There is a harmonic. So if you're playing a harmonic minor scale, I'll do the chromatic in a second. But this is like the harmonic is like a. So if I played the full minor scale, and if I wanted to play a chromatic scale, I'm using these 4 4 finger motions, but they're really just tightly wound. And when it's time to do the transition for the very next half step, I'm not going to shift the same amount that I would if I was shifting a fifth for the major scales that I showed earlier. So this is a chromatic scale. I'm going to do it. I'll do just 1 octave.
Oh my goodness, that is very impressive. We gotta talk. I'll search for you outside here.
Sure.
Excellent. Sure. Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. That's. I mean, this is all I can do for today. This is not the last you'll see of this technique, and it's not the last you'll see of Merlin Tuner. I'm going to create demo videos and kind of best practices, suggestions for how to use it. Like I mentioned yesterday, there's actually there's rhythmic. Oh, I didn't do the vibrato thing. I'm going to do it real quick. I don't know how that slipped my mind. Let me just show you that real quick. This is what it's like when I'm practicing vibrato. Oh, I did do it, but I did not do it the way I wanted to, which is starting and stopping the vibrato. And if you notice, I'm subdividing into triplets, and the triplet is important because the triplet is the best way to rhythmically practice being on the center of pitch on a downbeat and moving the beginning of the first oscillation in time as soon as you can. Just it's a rhythm that you can practice and get consistent at to start vibrato at the beginning of a note. I don't think I talked about that specifically, that specifically yesterday. But basically, you have a triplet. The note starts on the downbeat. The second beat is where the first half of the first oscillation begins. And then the first oscillation where you hit the wave crest, the very top of the oscillation, happens on the third subdivision. Of the triplet. So da 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 da. So I'm not gonna try to sing and play at the same time. It'll go da 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 da. So on the second of the 3 triplets is when you begin the oscillation, and I always begin the oscillation by moving downward because that's what's least noticeable by the ear, and I want that vibrato oscillation to just fade right in to kind of start, and you don't really even know when it starts. So that's what what I
I
meant
had
to
a
show.
question, Randy,
Sure.
about how you do the vibrato, like literally like with your hand, because I see so many different styles of vibrato and possibilities. I mean, it looks like you're just kind of moving very slightly, maybe up and down, or if you could talk a little bit about how you do the vibrato.
Sure. Yeah, that's I'm very specific about this motion, and I'm moving towards and away from the antenna. Um, if I were to show you from the side, this is what it would look like. Just
Oh, okay.
as simple as it could possibly be. And the reason I move towards and away from the antenna is because I know that I can control these muscle groups to achieve that motion. And how do I know that those are that's the best choice out of the multitude of approaches? Like, I mean, there's the technique where you move sideways. You know, they've got this. I don't think that provides you as much control.
Hmm.
And then there's a wrist vibrato, which also doesn't. That's very inconsistent, in my opinion. And then there's like finger vibrato, but which you can't really do if you apply a playing technique. If you do this, then applying vibrato is going to be very difficult. Um,
Yeah, the wrist is almost like carpal tunnel if you're
this,
doing
I
it
mean,
like this.
wrist. Anytime,
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I recommend everybody. I know it's not going to be possible with certain playing techniques, but to minimize the motion of your wrist, because carpal tunnel is a real thing. Okay, musicians who did, like, people who have devoted their life to being performers develop this problem, and it destroys their life. It destroys their career once it kicks in, and once it's happened, you know, they can try to deal with it for a little while. Um, you know, of course, there's the story with Clara, and she couldn't continue playing violin because of the injury with her. I guess I forget which arm it is. I think it was the bowing arm. Um, if somebody can clarify that, if somebody can clarify that, that would be awesome. Um, yeah, the takeaways from this discussion here or this lecture, it's more of a yap fest from me. Um, I've created this product, Merlin tuner. This is something that can show you what you are not quite able to hear. Uh, it can show you when you're right and when you're right on pitch, when your transitions are smooth. It can show you when you're on the right note before you enter from complete silence. It can help you practice. It can help you detect problems in your instrument. Um, I've diagnosed a lot of issues with my instrument and with like just interference in general. So I could tell. I'm gonna do one thing really quick. I'm gonna go up by where my camera is, and I'm gonna move my arm, and you can watch the tuner and see how much I'm influencing the pitch just from the like. I'm not even gonna be like 6 feet away. Okay, actually, I'm gonna move. I'm gonna go in that direction, and I'm just gonna move my arm like this. Okay, I'm gonna be about 8 feet, maybe 9 feet away. That's like 2 or 3 meters away. So of course the pitch inverted. So it's sort of a different relationship. But you could see that from that distance, I was still able to modulate and shift that pitch like an eighth tone, almost a quarter tone, and that these are things that you can become more aware of. Let's say when you've got pets moving around your instrument, or people, you know how far you need to place people in order for them to be outside of where you can minimize that interference the most. It's just endless. And of course, I think I could talk about this for another 2 hours, but I think we'll end it there. Thanks for sticking around, and have fun with. Oh, I mean, I forgot to. I wanted to wrap up with the same thing I'm showing here. Merlin tuner is a real product you can buy. You can go to my website and purchase it, and it's $15. So really reasonable investment. You have to have a computer to use it. You have to have an audio interface to be able to plug it in, to plug your Theremin into the computer. And your computer has to meet a certain set of minimum requirements for the host application. And that host, it just means you need to have the program that's called Max Cycling 74 Max installed on your computer so that you can load this device into it. It's a free download, but that's what's required. I meant to mention that earlier. But also it works with Ableton Live. Those of you who are used to that digital audio workstation, you can drop this device in to an audio track, and it works like an effect. So it works like an audio effect. So of course, it's not producing any sound, but it just lives. The device can just live in your Ableton set. So there's advantages to that too. You can record yourself playing and then play it back and then watch your, have a look back at how accurate your pitch was. So really great features are just like hidden. I never really went under the hood. Okay, I'll do that a little bit later for anyone who's interested. But there's like a sub page here where you have options. There's one specifically for the Etherwave Pro. There's one for adjusting the location, and then there's one for the location and size, and one for the response. Okay, I'm done for real this time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Randy. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very interesting.